If you had told me, on the morning I woke up alone in that farmhouse, that the answer to everything was tucked inside the pages of my own Bible, sitting right there on the nightstand where it had been sitting for 11 years, I would have laughed at you. Not a cruel laugh, a tired one. The kind of laugh an old man gives when he has heard every theory, every kind word, every well-meaning guess from strangers who did not know his wife, and never would. I would have told you that I read that Bible every single night before I closed my eyes, that I knew every crease in its leather cover, every soft, worn corner, every place where the spine had gone gray and thin from 40 years of hands opening it and closing it and opening it again. But I did not know it at all. I did not know the first thing about what that Bible was carrying inside itself the whole time, quiet as a held breath, waiting for someone to notice. Before I tell you what I found, and before I tell you how my wife disappeared without a single footprint in the frost, without a single wagon wheel turning on our gravel road, without so much as a bent blade of grass to mark which direction she had gone, I need you to do something for me. Type in the comments below exactly where in the world you are watching this from right now. I read every single one of them, every last comment. Late at night when the house is quiet and my own thoughts get too loud to sit with alone, and I want to know who is sitting with me tonight while I tell you this story. And if you have not already, press that like button and subscribe, because there is a part near the end of this that I think you are going to want to come back to. A part I have never told the way I am about to tell it now, and you will not want to miss what I share next. Now, let me start from the beginning, because you deserve to hear it the way I lived it, slow and true, the same way it happened to me. My name does not matter so much as the name I will give her. So I will call her by the name she used with me every single day of our life together. The name that was written on our marriage certificate and on the birth certificates of our 4 children, and on every letter she ever wrote to me across 2 lifetimes. I will call her Ruth. We were both Amish, both raised, or in her case, both settled, in the same small community in the hill country, though not in the same church district, hers being 3 farms over, and mine being closer to the creek. I met her at a wedding when I was 19 years old. It was late summer, the kind of day where the heat sits heavy over the fields even after the sun starts going down, and the whole district had gathered in a neighbor's barn for the wedding meal. Tables set end to end with more roast chicken and creamed celery and pie than I had ever seen in one place in my life. I noticed her before I ever learned her name. She was carrying serving trays through that crowded room. Quiet, steady, never spilling a drop, weaving between benches and children underfoot, and old men reaching for second helpings. And something about the way she moved, unhurried but purposeful. The way she balanced a tray in one hand and refilled a water pitcher with the other, without so much as glancing down, made me watch her the whole afternoon. I could not have told you then what it was that drew my eye to her and kept it there. I only knew that I found myself, more than once, losing the thread of a conversation with the young men beside me, because I was watching a girl I had never met carry dishes back and forth from the kitchen. I did not say a word to her that day. I was 19 and shy in the particular way that farm boys are shy, capable enough with animals and equipment and hard labor but tongue-tied around anyone whose good opinion actually mattered to me. It took another 2 years before we spoke properly, and even then it was not because either of us worked up the courage on our own. It happened at a quilting frolic that autumn. One of those long afternoons where the women sit in a circle around a frame, stretched tight with fabric, needles going in and out in careful rhythm, and the young men are put to some other task nearby, splitting wood or hauling water, close enough to be useful and far enough to be out from underfoot. I had been roped into helping carry benches, and when my work was done, I found myself, for reasons I could not fully explain even to myself, drawn toward the quilting frame instead of back out to the men. There was an empty chair beside her, and before I had quite decided to sit in it, I had already sat in it. She glanced at me sideways, not unkindly, and then went back to her stitching. And after a moment she must have noticed something in my own attempt at a few stitches, because she reached over, without a word of scolding, and corrected my hand, guiding my fingers gently back onto the pattern I had wandered off of. "Not so tight," she said, the first words she ever spoke directly to me. "Quiet and even. Let the thread breathe a little, or it will pucker the whole seam." I do not remember what I said back to her. I remember only that I fell in love with her patience before I fell in love with anything else about her, before I even properly knew the color of her eyes in good daylight, before I knew her laugh or her singing voice, or the particular way she pressed her lips together when she was trying not to smile at something foolish I had said. I fell in love with the steadiness of her hands guiding mine, and everything else I came to love about her over the following months only confirmed what that first small kindness had already told me. We courted the way our people court, slow and careful, buggy rides after Sunday singings, long walks along the fence lines with a respectable distance kept between us, letters passed back and forth through her younger brother, who charged me a penny a letter for his trouble and thought himself very clever about it. I asked her father for permission to marry her on a cold evening in late winter, standing in his kitchen with my hat in my hands like every nervous young man before me. And though he made me wait a long, silent moment before answering, the answer, when it came, was warm. Ruth told me later that she had known before I asked, had known for months, the particular certainty a person carries about the shape their life is about to take. But she let me ask anyway, because she said a woman likes to hear the words even when she already knows the answer they will bring. We were married in the autumn, under a sky the color of a ripe peach, in a wedding not so different from the one where I had first watched her carry those serving trays. My father built us a small house on the edge of his land, close enough to walk to on a Sunday, far enough to feel like our very own world. With a hand pump in the kitchen and a wood stove Ruth learned to coax into just the right heat within a matter of weeks, and a garden plot out back that she claimed for her own before we had even finished moving in our furniture. Ruth kept a garden that fed half the district in a good year. She canned tomatoes and beans and made apple butter so rich that children would sneak spoonfuls from the jar when they thought no one was looking. And more than once I caught our own children, and later, our grandchildren, standing at the pantry shelf with a guilty spoon in hand and apple butter on their chins, and I never once had the heart to scold them for it, because I understood the temptation better than anyone. She sang while she worked, low and soft, hymns mostly, the same slow unaccompanied hymns we sang in church, stretched out over long notes the way our tradition holds them. But sometimes, especially in the earliest years of our marriage, before the children came, I caught her humming something older, something with no words I recognized, a melody that did not belong to any hymnal I had ever opened, rising and falling in a pattern that felt foreign to my ear, even as it felt achingly familiar to something in her. When I asked her about it, she would only smile, a smile that did not quite reach all the way into her eyes, and say it was a tune from before, from a life she barely remembered. And then she would change the subject so smoothly that I would not realize until later, walking out to the barn or lying awake that night, that she had steered us cleanly away from whatever that tune had meant to her. I remember one evening in our second year of marriage, sitting on the porch while the fireflies came up out of the grass. The two of us worn out from a long day of harvest work, but not yet ready to go inside. And I asked her, half in jest, the kind of question a young husband asks when he still believes every corner of his wife's heart is his for the discovering, whether she had ever been sweet on a boy before she came to our district. It was an innocent question, or I meant it as one. The kind of teasing thing a happy young couple says to each other on a summer porch. She grew quiet in a way that was not like her usual quiet, which was warm and easy and comfortable to sit inside of, the way a favorite quilt is comfortable. This was a different kind of quiet, careful and guarded, like a door being pulled shut without a sound, so gently that you would not know it had closed at all, unless you happened to be looking directly at it when it did. She told me there had been a life before, a hard one, and that she did not wish to speak of it, and that she hoped I could love her without needing every corner of her past laid bare before me. Her voice did not shake when she said it. That was the part I remembered most, in the years that followed, turning the memory over again and again, like a stone worn smooth from handling. She was not fragile or tearful when she told me this. She was firm. The way a person is firm when they have already decided, long before you ever asked, exactly how much of themselves they intend to let you see. I told her I could love her that way, without every corner laid bare. And I meant it, truly meant it, with the whole uncomplicated certainty of a young man who believes love conquers every unanswered question simply by being love. For many years, that answer was enough for both of us. I think now, looking back across the whole long distance of our marriage, that this porch, this evening, this quiet, firm refusal wrapped so gently, it barely felt like a refusal at all, was the moment our marriage quietly agreed to its one great exception, the single subject we would build our whole life around without ever touching directly. The way a river bends itself permanently around a stone it decides, early on, it will not try to move. There were other small signs too, small enough that I only recognized them for what they were much later, small enough that at the time I filed each one away without a second thought. The way a person files away any small oddity in someone they love completely and trust completely. Ruth flinched, just slightly, whenever an unfamiliar car came up our lane, even years and years into our marriage, long after any reasonable person would have stopped being startled by such an ordinary thing, long after English cars delivering feed or bringing a driver for a hired trip had become as common on our road as horse and buggy. I remember one particular afternoon, perhaps a decade into our marriage, when a car I did not recognize turned up our lane. Some salesman lost and looking for directions, and Ruth, who had been shelling peas on the porch, went so still and so pale that I actually rose from my chair before I understood what I was rising to do. Some old animal instinct in me answering some old animal instinct in her, though I could not have told you, in that moment, what exactly I thought I was protecting her from. She kept a small bag packed in the back of our linen closet for years, tucked behind the extra quilts, where a person would only find it if they were looking for something specific and rummaging deep. And when I once asked her about it, having stumbled across it while searching for an extra blanket during a cold snap, she told me only that old habits from a hard childhood die slowly, that she liked knowing certain things were ready if they were ever needed. And I let the matter rest, the way a trusting husband does. The way I let 100 small, unexplained things rest over the years, because I loved her, and because our faith teaches patience with the parts of another person that are not yet ready to be shown. She was, in every other way, the picture of an ordinary Amish wife, devoted to her garden, devoted to her children, devoted to the quiet rhythms of our faith and our district and our long, slow seasons. And it was easy, most days, most years, to forget that there was any part of her I did not fully know. It is only now, looking back with the whole shape of the story laid out before me, that I understand how much discipline it must have taken her to keep that small bag ready and that flinch mostly hidden for 4 decades. How much of her daily peace was quietly, constantly, built on top of a readiness she prayed she would never need. That should have been my first clue, a life from before, carried so carefully and so completely that it left almost no visible mark on the woman I knew, except in these small, unguarded moments when the mark showed through despite her best efforts. I did not press her on it, not that evening on the porch, and not in the years that followed. Among our people, we do not always ask one another where we came from, especially if someone joined the faith later in life rather than being born into it, as I had been. There is a gentleness in this, a way of receiving a person into the community without demanding the full accounting of everything that brought them to our door. Ruth was one of those who came to us from outside. She arrived in our community when she was 17 years old, taken in by an older widow named Sarah Fisher, a woman well known and well respected in our district for her quiet generosity and her habit of taking in strays, whether they were injured barn cats or motherless calves, or, as it turned out that particular year, a frightened teenage girl who needed a home the Lord had apparently seen fit to provide through Sarah's door. Sarah Fisher never fully explained where the girl had come from. She told the bishop and the ministers only that Ruth needed a home, and that the Lord had provided one, and our community, trusting Sarah's judgment as much as we trusted our own, asked no further questions. Ruth took her instruction over the following 2 years, learning our language and our ways, and our habits of dress and worship, with a diligence that impressed even the sternest of our elders. And she was baptized within 2 years of her arrival, and by all appearances became as devoted a member of our faith as anyone born into it. More devoted, in truth, than some who had never known any other life. I never doubted her devotion. Not once in 40 years of marriage did I doubt the sincerity of her faith, her love of Scripture, her patience with the long, slow discipline of our tradition. But I did wonder, quietly, in the back corners of my mind, in the particular hours of the night when a husband's thoughts wander, places his daytime self would never let them go. What she had left behind, and why she never spoke of it, and what kind of life could make a 17-year-old girl so willing, so eager even, to leave every single piece of it behind her, and start again as someone else entirely. We built a good life together, Ruth and I, the kind of life that from the outside would look like nothing more remarkable than any other farm family in our district, and from the inside felt like the whole entire world. We raised 4 children on that little farm. There was our eldest, a son we named after my own father, steady and quiet the way farm-born sons often are, who took over a piece of our land when he married and raised his own family within walking distance of ours. There was our second child, a daughter with her mother's patient hands, who became known throughout the district for her quilting. Her stitches so fine and so even that women from 3 church districts over would ask her to finish the difficult corners of their own quilts when their own hands could not manage it. There was our third child, another son, who left the faith for the English world when he was 22 years old. A decision that broke Ruth's heart more than she ever let on in the daylight hours, though I saw her crying over his letters some nights when she thought I was asleep, her shoulders shaking silently in the dark beside me while she read. By the light of a small battery lantern she thought I did not notice. The news of his English life, his English wife, his English children, who called her Grandma Ruth, but did not know a word of the language she had raised his older siblings speaking. And there was our youngest, another daughter, born when Ruth and I were already well into our 30s and had not expected another child, a surprise and a gift both, who stayed close to us her whole life and became, in time, the mother of the granddaughter who would one day find what I am about to tell you she found. We buried her adoptive mother, old Sarah Fisher, when Ruth was 41 years old, on a gray November afternoon, with a wind sharp enough to cut through even our warmest coats. I remember Ruth standing at the graveside, holding a small wooden box that Sarah had left her, a plain, unadorned box of dark walnut with a simple brass clasp, refusing to let anyone else carry it, not even me, though I offered more than once as we walked the long distance from the buggies to the burial ground. She held it against her chest the entire service, both arms wrapped around it the way a mother holds a child she is afraid someone will try to take from her. And she did not set it down again until we were home, and even then she carried it directly up to our bedroom and placed it on the top shelf of our wardrobe, high enough that our children, still young at the time, could not easily reach it. I asked her once, gently, some months after the funeral, on an ordinary evening when the question seemed to rise naturally out of the quiet between us, what was in the box. Ruth was mending a shirt at the time, and her needle paused, just for a moment, hovering above the fabric, before she resumed her stitching without looking up at me. "Answers I am not ready to give," she said, and something in her voice, some particular weight settled into those 6 words, told me not to ask again. I did not ask again. Not once in the 17 years between that evening and the day she disappeared did I ask her about that box a second time, though I thought about it often, especially on nights when I could not sleep, and my mind wandered its way back to that wardrobe shelf and the plain walnut box sitting on it, gathering dust, holding whatever answers it was holding, patient as stone. I tell you all of this, all these small, ordinary details of our long marriage, so that you understand something important about the shape of our life together, which is that our marriage, while full of love, true love, the deep, unshakable kind that survives hard winters and lean harvests and every ordinary disagreement 2 people accumulate across 4 decades, also had a locked door somewhere inside it, a door Ruth kept closed with such gentleness that I never felt shut out, only that there was a room I was not yet invited into. I trusted. In the easy, uncomplicated way a person trusts something they have never had reason to doubt, that someday, when she was ready, she would open that door herself, would sit me down at our kitchen table, and finally tell me whatever it was that lived behind her careful quiet, her flinches at unfamiliar cars, her packed bag in the linen closet, her walnut box on the high shelf. I imagined, when I imagined it at all, that this reckoning would come in old age, perhaps, when the urgency of whatever she was protecting had long since faded, or perhaps on her deathbed, the way Sarah Fisher had apparently passed some portion of the truth to her. I never imagined that someday would come the way it did, wrenched open not by Ruth's own choosing, but by danger itself, arriving unannounced up our gravel lane on quiet English tires, exactly the way, I understand now, she had always secretly feared it might. Let me tell you a little more about the ordinary rhythm of our days before I bring you to the morning everything changed, because I want you to understand what was lost, and later what was found, in its fullest weight. Our days began before the sun most mornings, Ruth already up and moving through the kitchen while I was still finding my boots, the wood stove crackling to life under her hands, the particular smell of her coffee and her biscuits filling the house before I had even made it fully down the stairs. She kept a strict but gentle order to our household, chores assigned to each child according to their age and ability, a system she managed with such quiet authority that our children obeyed her without complaint far more readily than they ever obeyed me, though I was, on paper, the head of our household. She had a gift for making hard work feel like a shared project rather than a burden, singing while she worked the churn or hung the wash, drawing the children into her rhythm until the whole yard seemed to move in time with her. In the evenings, after the animals were fed and the dishes put away, we would often sit together on the porch, or in winter by the stove, Ruth with her mending, and me with whatever small woodworking project I had going, and we would talk. Sometimes about the day's small events, sometimes about the children, sometimes about scripture, sometimes about nothing at all, simply sitting together in the particular comfortable silence of two people who have run entirely out of urgent things to say to each other and are content, deeply content, in the saying of nothing. It was, I want you to understand, a genuinely happy marriage. Not a marriage built on some tragic hidden foundation that made everything else a kind of performance. Ruth loved our life. She loved me. She loved our children with a fierceness that never once wavered, even toward the son who left the faith, even when his leaving cost her more grief than she ever let show on her face in the daylight. The secret she carried did not diminish any of that love. It only sat alongside it, quiet and separate, like a second heartbeat she had learned to keep from showing in her pulse. There is one more memory I want to give you before I move on to the morning she disappeared, because I think it matters for everything that comes after. When our youngest daughter was small, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, she came running into the kitchen one afternoon in tears, having fallen from the porch step and scraped her knee badly enough to bleed. Ruth scooped her up onto the kitchen table without a moment's hesitation, cleaning the wound with a steady, practiced efficiency that struck me, even in the small panic of the moment, as somehow more capable than the situation required. More capable than most mothers manage with a simple scraped knee. She spoke to our daughter the entire time in a low, calm, almost professional voice. The kind of voice you might expect from someone trained to handle far worse injuries than a child's skinned knee, telling her exactly what she was doing and why, keeping her talking and distracted so she would not focus on the pain. When it was over, and our daughter had been bandaged and comforted and sent back outside to play, I asked Ruth, half in admiration and half in genuine curiosity, where she had learned to tend a wound so calmly and so well. She said only that she had learned it a long time ago, from someone who cared for her once, and then she turned back to her work at the stove, and the conversation, as so many conversations about Ruth's past did, simply ended there, closed as gently and as firmly as a door pulled shut by a hand that did not want to be seen closing it. It was a Tuesday in late October, 11 years ago now, though it feels like 11 lifetimes, and also like it happened yesterday, depending on which hour of the night you catch me thinking about it. The leaves had already turned that year, an early cold snap, having stripped most of the color from the trees along our lane a full 2 weeks before it usually happened, so that the whole landscape had a bare, waiting look to it. The kind of look the countryside gets in the deep part of autumn, when it has finished its brief blaze of color and settled in to wait out the coming winter. I remember that detail, because I have gone back to it so many times since, wondering foolishly whether the bareness of the trees that particular week was somehow a sign I should have read. Though of course a man cannot read signs in falling leaves any more than he can read them in the shape of clouds, and I know this, and still some part of me has never stopped looking for a warning I might have. Missed in the ordinary turning of that season. Ruth rose before dawn, same as she did every day of our marriage, same steady rhythm she had kept for 4 decades without fail. I heard her moving about the kitchen in that particular half-awake way a husband hears his wife's morning routine after so many years. Heard the wood stove door creak open and shut. Heard the particular rhythm of her feet on the floorboards that I could have picked out of 100 sets of footsteps. Could have picked out, I believe even now, if some miracle let me hear it again. There was nothing different in the sound of her that morning. I want to be very clear about that, because in the weeks and months that followed, so many people asked me, gently or not so gently, whether I had heard anything unusual, whether her footsteps had sounded hurried or frightened, whether there had been any sound of a struggle, any sound of a door forced or a voice raised. There was none of that. There was only the ordinary beloved sound of my wife beginning her ordinary beloved day. The same sound I had woken to 10,000 mornings before that one. I dozed a little longer, the way an old husband does when he trusts his wife has the morning well in hand, drifting in and out of that particular light sleep that comes in the hour before you actually need to rise, when the mind knows the day is coming, but has not yet fully committed to meeting it. I do not know how long I dozed. Long enough, certainly, that by the time I finally rose and came down to the kitchen, dressed and ready for the day's chores, the sun was well up over the tree line, and the kitchen had that particular stillness of a room that has been empty for some time, rather than one someone has just stepped out of. There was coffee still warm in the pot, not hot, but warm, the kind of warm that suggested it had been sitting perhaps 20 or 30 minutes since it was last poured. There was a plate set out for me with 2 biscuits and a spoonful of her apple butter, arranged the exact way she always arranged my breakfast, and no Ruth. I did not panic at first. I want you to understand that, because I have thought so many times since about how differently I might have acted if I had understood, in that first hour, what I was actually facing. I thought perhaps she had gone out to the chicken coop, which she often did before starting on the rest of the morning's work. Or perhaps over to check on the Yoda family's new baby, a task she took up often without telling me in advance, since she knew I would only worry about her walking alone on the road. Worry that she had always found faintly amusing given how many times she had walked that same stretch of road safely across the years. I ate my biscuits, cooling now, but still good, still tasting of her particular hand with the recipe, a little more cinnamon than most women in our district used. I did my morning chores, same as any other day, feeding the horses, checking the water trough, gathering eggs from a coop that I noted, in passing, had not yet been visited that morning. The hens still roosting and fussing the way they did when no one had come to collect from them yet. A small detail that should have told me something, but that I filed away, at the time, as simply meaning Ruth had gone somewhere other than the coop first. By mid-morning I had mended a fence post that had come loose in a storm the week before, work I had been meaning to get to and used, that morning, as a way of occupying my hands while some small, unacknowledged part of me kept one ear turned toward the lane, listening for her return. By noon, when she still had not returned, I began to feel that particular cold pressure in my chest that every husband and wife knows, the one that says something is not right, even before your mind is willing to admit it. A pressure that starts small, a kind of low hum beneath the ordinary business of the day, and grows, minute by minute, into something you can no longer work around or explain away. I walked to the Yoda farm myself, the visit I had assumed she'd made hours earlier. Mrs. Yoda came to the door with the new baby on her hip, and her face, when I asked whether Ruth had been by that morning, went from pleasant surprise at my visit to a careful, searching concern within the space of a few seconds. No, she told me, they had not seen Ruth that day at all, though she had visited just 3 days prior with a jar of her apple butter for the new baby's mother, a visit Mrs. Yoder described in warm, ordinary detail that only made the absence of any such visit that morning feel stranger by comparison. I walked next to her sister's house, 3 miles down the road, my pace quickening with every step in a way I was not fully conscious of, until I found myself nearly jogging the last quarter mile. No, they had not seen her either, and her sister's face went pale in a way that I did not understand at the time, but that I think back on often now. A paleness that was not simply the ordinary alarm of hearing a sister was missing, but something deeper, something closer to recognition, as though some fear her sister had carried quietly for years had suddenly, terribly arrived. I did not think anything of this at the time. I was too consumed by my own rising fear to notice the particular shape of hers. It is only now, knowing what I know, that I understand her sister must have carried some fragment of Ruth's secret all along. Some small piece entrusted to her the way certain pieces were entrusted to Sarah Fisher and to no one else, and that the color draining from her face that afternoon was the color of a fear she had hoped. For 17 years of Ruth's marriage, she would never have to feel. I walked to the bishop's house after that, and from there to 3 more farms scattered across our district, each visit following the same pattern, the same hopeful knock, the same disappointed answer, the same slow-spreading realization moving from household to household ahead of me, even as I walked. The way news moves through a close community faster than any single messenger could carry it. By the time the sun was going down, painting the bare October trees in long orange light, half our church district was out searching the fields and the tree lines, calling her name into a wind that gave no answer back. Lanterns beginning to bob here and there across the darkening fields like fireflies scattered too late in the season, out of their proper time. That first night, before the English police ever arrived, our whole church district gathered in our front yard with lanterns, the way our people have always gathered when trouble comes, dozens of families arriving within the hour of the word spreading, buggies lining our lane further than I had ever seen them line it, even for a wedding or a funeral. I remember standing among them, surrounded by so much love and so much worry, neighbors pressing my hands, women bringing food I could not eat, men organizing search parties with the same steady competence they brought to a barn raising, and feeling, in the middle of all that gathered love, more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life, a loneliness that had nothing to do with the number of people around me, and everything to do with the sudden, vertiginous absence of the one person among all of them who had always stood closest. My sons walked the tree line calling her name until their voices went hoarse, their lanterns growing smaller and smaller as they moved further from the house, disappearing behind the tree line and reappearing again as the search wound its way through our property and onto the neighboring farms. My daughters sat with me in the kitchen for a time, holding my hands, praying over that cold cup of coffee Ruth had left behind, the one I could not bring myself to pour out for weeks afterward, though I know now, looking back, that leaving it sitting there was a small, strange comfort I allowed myself. A last physical trace of the morning, she was still simply my wife who had stepped out for a moment, rather than my wife who had vanished. The bishop himself came and sat with me a long while that first night, saying very little, because there was very little a man of God could say to a husband whose wife had simply ceased to exist somewhere between the wood stove and the front door. But his presence itself was its own kind of comfort, a steady, silent witness to a grief too large yet for words. The English police came the next morning, since our bishop felt it was serious enough to involve them, a decision that was not made lightly in our community, where we generally handle our own affairs and turn to outside authority only when a situation has grown too large or too dangerous to manage within our own ways. They arrived in 2 cars, 4 officers in all, along with, by that afternoon, a pair of trained dogs and a small team that spent the better part of 3 days combing our fields, our barn, our outbuildings, the tree line along the creek, and the ditches running alongside every road within a 5-mile radius of our farm. On the second day, a small airplane flew low over our fields for hours at a stretch, its engine a strange, droning intrusion into the quiet of our valley, circling wide patterns over the woods and pastures while I stood in the yard and watched it. Feeling a peculiar, helpless smallness at the sight of so much modern effort being poured into finding one Amish woman, who had, as far as any of us could tell, simply stepped outside her own kitchen and vanished into thin autumn air. A detective named Mr. Hartley led the investigation, a patient, careful man in his middle years, who treated our family with far more gentleness than I had expected from someone outside our faith. Someone accustomed, I imagine, to the noise and speed and technology of the English world, suddenly finding himself investigating a disappearance in a community that kept no telephones in its homes, no electric lights, no security cameras, none of the ordinary tools he likely relied on for most of his cases. He adapted himself to our ways with a respect that earned him a good deal of trust from our district over those difficult weeks, removing his hat when he entered our home, speaking slowly and without impatience, even when our answers to his questions were halting or uncertain, waiting without complaint while I searched my memory for details I was not accustomed to being asked to produce. He asked me questions I had never thought to ask myself, questions that, in the ordinary course of our quiet life together, would have seemed almost absurd to voice out loud. Did Ruth have any enemies? Had she seemed frightened in recent weeks? Had any strangers come around the farm? Had she received any unusual mail? Though, of course, our mail was limited and simple, mostly letters from family and the occasional bill. Had she changed her routine in any way in the days before she disappeared? I answered honestly, each time, that I did not know of any enemies, that our life together had seemed, to me, entirely ordinary right up until the morning it stopped being ordinary at all. And yet, even as I said this, I remembered, faintly, uneasily, a feeling I could not name. A sense that something had been sitting differently in our house in the days before she vanished. Some subtle wrongness in the air that I had noticed without noticing. The way you sometimes register a change in weather before you consciously realize the sky has darkened. I told Mr. Hartley about this feeling, vague and unhelpful as it was, and he wrote it down carefully in his small notebook without any sign of impatience at how little substance I could offer him. He asked whether Ruth had seemed distracted in recent days, and I told him, thinking back, that she had. She had stood at the kitchen window longer than usual on several mornings that week, looking out toward the road in a way that, at the time, I had attributed simply to the changing season, to some private thought of her own. She had checked that the doors were properly latched at night with an attentiveness that struck me even then as slightly more careful than her usual habit. Though our doors were always latched, and I had thought nothing serious of it, she had held our youngest grandchild, who happened to be visiting that week, a little longer and a little tighter than usual when it came time to send the child home, pressing a kiss to the top of the small head that lingered just a moment past what was ordinary, and I remember teasing her gently about it, asking if she was feeling sentimental and she had smiled and said only that a grandmother is allowed her sentimental moments, and I had let it go, the way I let so many small things go across the whole span of our marriage, trusting that whatever passed briefly across her face would pass again on its own, the way weather does. They found nothing. Not a shoe. Not a torn piece of her dress caught on a fence wire. Not a single sign that a 58-year-old Amish woman had walked out of her kitchen and vanished into thin autumn air. Her coat was still hanging on its peg by the door, the wool coat she wore for anything colder than a mild autumn morning. Her shoes, the ones she wore for chores, were still lined up neatly on the mat beside the door, exactly where she left them every night. Her bonnet was still on its hook. Whatever she had left in her house shoes. In whatever she was wearing when she rose that morning, a plain house dress and apron, and the soft slippers she wore for indoor work before switching to her outdoor shoes. And she had left no trace whatsoever of where she had gone or why. No tire tracks that could not be accounted for by our own wagon or by neighbors' visits earlier in the week. No footprints leading away from the house in any direction that the dogs could pick up and hold for more than a few dozen yards before losing the scent entirely at the edge of our gravel lane, as though she had simply stepped into a passing vehicle and been carried away. Or as though she had never walked at all, but had somehow been lifted straight out of the world. I want to pause here and tell you something, because I think it matters for what comes later in this story. Something about the particular cruelty of a small, close community, faced with an unexplainable absence. In those first weeks, there were whispers. Cruel ones, though I do not believe most of the people whispering them intended cruelty. Only the ordinary human need to make sense of a thing that made no sense. To fill an unbearable silence with some kind of explanation, even a wrong one. Some in our community wondered aloud whether Ruth had simply run off, back to whatever English life she had come from before Sarah Fisher took her in. A theory that gained a certain grim traction, precisely because so few people knew anything real about where she had come from in the first place. The mystery of her origins becoming, in the absence of facts, a canvas onto which anyone could paint whatever story suited their own imagination. Some wondered whether she had grown tired of me, tired of our life, tired of the plainness of it all after 40 years, whether some restlessness long suppressed had finally broken free and carried her off towards some easier, more comfortable existence in the English world. I heard these whispers even though people tried to keep them from me. The way whispers always find their way to the person they concern most, drifting in sideways through a half-overheard conversation at the feed store, or through the careful, too gentle way certain neighbors began looking at me, as though bracing themselves to comfort a man whose humiliation, and not merely his grief, they expected to eventually surface. I want you to know that not for one single day did I believe them. I knew my wife. I knew the way she looked at our grandchildren, the fierce, unguarded tenderness in her face when she held a new baby for the first time. I knew the way she still reached for my hand on cold nights, even after 4 decades of marriage. Her fingers finding mine beneath the quilt, without either of us needing to speak. An old habit as automatic and as certain as breathing. A woman does not build a life of that much love, that much daily devotion poured into a garden and a kitchen, and 4 children and a husband she chose to reach for every single night for 40 years, and then simply walk away from it without a word. Not unless something far larger than tiredness or restlessness has taken hold of her. I believed, from the very first hour, standing in that empty kitchen with her warm coffee going cold in the pot, that something had happened to her, or that something had come for her. I simply did not know what, and not knowing, I would come to learn, is its own particular and prolonged kind of suffering. one that does not diminish with time the way grief for a known loss eventually softens, but instead sits permanently at a certain pitch, neither growing nor fading, simply waiting. The searching went on for months, though it grew thinner and thinner as the weeks passed, the way these things always do, the way even the most devoted community cannot sustain the intensity of those first frantic days forever, life's ordinary demands slowly reasserting themselves, the harvest needing to be finished, the animals needing tending, the children needing schooling, until the search parties that had once numbered in the dozens dwindled to a handful of the most dedicated neighbors walking the fields on weekends, and then, eventually, to no organized search at all, only the ordinary vigilance of a community that has not forgotten, but has had to make room, however unwillingly, for the rest of life to continue alongside its grief. The English police eventually told me, gently but plainly, sitting at my own kitchen table with Mr. Hartley's careful notebook now thick with weeks of fruitless notes, that without a body and without any sign of foul play, there was very little more they could do. He told me, and I could hear in his voice, that this cost him something to say, that cases like Ruth's, cases with no evidence of struggle and no evidence of violence, sometimes simply remained unsolved, filed away and revisited occasionally when some new lead surfaced, but otherwise left open and unanswered indefinitely. He gave me his card, a small, stiff rectangle of English paper that felt strange and foreign in my hand, and told me to call the number on it, using a neighbor's telephone or the one at the hardware store in town, if I ever remembered anything new, however small. Our own community continued to pray for her at every service, her name spoken aloud in our gatherings for years afterward, a steady thread of hope woven into every Sunday, even as the practical search efforts faded away. And for years afterward, whenever a new family moved into our district, drawn by cheaper land or a call to help establish a new settlement, someone would quietly tell them the story of the Amish woman who vanished without a trace, as though she had become a kind of ghost story even while I still held out hope, stubborn and quiet and increasingly private, that she was alive somewhere, that the not knowing I carried was somehow different in kind from the finality of death, though I could not have told you, in those early years, what exactly I imagined that difference to mean for my own daily life, for the raising of our remaining children, for the slow accumulation of birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays that I would now have to walk through without her. I kept her side of the bed exactly as it was. I know that sounds foolish for a practical man like myself to admit, but I could not bring myself to change it. Could not bring myself to move her comb from its shelf by the wash basin, or fold away the extra quilt she kept at the foot of the bed for cold nights. Could not even bring myself, for the better part of a year, to sleep on her side rather than my own, as though claiming that half of the mattress for myself would be some final, unbearable admission that she was truly gone. Her nightgown stayed folded on her pillow, the same soft flannel nightgown she had been mending a small tear in only the week before she disappeared. The mending never finished. The needle still resting in the fabric where she had left it, a detail that undid me more than almost any other in those early months. That small, unfinished task speaking somehow more eloquently of her sudden absence than anything the police or the searchers had found. Her comb stayed on the little shelf by the wash basin, a few strands of her hair still caught in its teeth, dark, going gray, and I could not bring myself to clean it. Could not bring myself to disturb even that smallest, most physical remnant of her presence. And her Bible, the one Sarah Fisher had given her the year she was baptized into our faith, stayed on the nightstand exactly where she left it every night before blowing out the lamp, its worn leather cover facing up. its ribbon marker tucked between the pages of whatever psalm or epistle she had last been reading, though I confess I never once thought, in all those years, to check exactly which page that ribbon marked. Never thought there might be some significance in the particular passage her hand had last rested upon before whatever happened to her happened. I read from that Bible many nights over the years that followed, not because I could not use my own, which sat on the shelf downstairs where it had always sat, gathering its own separate layer of dust in those years, but because reading from hers made me feel closer to her, as though the words might carry some trace of her hands, her breath, the particular way she used to run her thumb along the edge of a page before turning it, a small habitual gesture I had watched 1,000 times without ever once thinking to remark upon it. The way we so rarely notice the small physical habits of the people we love most, until those habits are the only thing left of them to hold on to. I read the Psalms most often, the ones about waiting, about crying out and receiving no answer and waiting still, finding in that ancient language of longing and unanswered prayer a kind of companionship that nothing else in those years could offer me. Psalm 130 became a kind of second home to me, a passage I returned to so often that I no longer needed to find it on the page, my hands turning there almost of their own accord even in the dark. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. My soul waits for the Lord, more than watchmen wait for the morning. More than watchmen wait for the morning. I waited 11 years. Watchmen for a morning I was beginning to fear would never come. And I want to tell you honestly that there were nights in those 11 years when my faith held that morning would surely come. And there were other nights, harder ones, when I feared I had simply become a man reciting hopeful words into an empty room. The way a person recites a prayer, more out of habit than out of any remaining belief that the prayer is being heard. Our children grew up around that absence the way young trees grow around an old fence post, their branches learning to curve where the obstacle demands, until the shape of the obstacle becomes simply part of the shape of the tree itself. My eldest son took on more responsibility around our farm in those years than any young man his age should reasonably have had to carry, stepping quietly into duties that would have been his mother's, checking in on me each week, sitting with me some evenings when the silence of the house grew too heavy for one man alone to bear. My daughters took turns, in those early years, coming to cook and clean on the days when I could not manage it myself. My quilting daughter especially, who I noticed, more than once, sitting at Ruth's old quilting frame in the front room, running her hands over the half-finished quilt her mother had left there, though she never once in all those years tried to finish it herself, as though some part of her understood that finishing it would be its own kind of surrender, an admission that her mother would never return to complete it. Our youngest, the daughter whose child would one day find the seam in that old Bible's cover, married a good young man from a neighboring district 3 years after Ruth disappeared, and I remember standing at her wedding, watching her walk toward her waiting room, feeling a grief so sharp and so specific that it nearly buckled my knees. The grief not merely of missing my wife in a general sense, but of missing her in that exact particular moment. Missing her hands, which should have been fussing over our daughter's dress. Missing her voice, which should have been the first to cry with joy when the vows were spoken. Missing the specific weight of her arm that should have been looped through mine as we watched our youngest child begin her own married life. I got through the day, as a father must, smiling and greeting guests and playing my part in the celebration. But that night, alone in our bed, I wept in a way I had not allowed myself to weep since the earliest weeks of her disappearance. A grief that had gone quiet over the intervening years' finding. In that wedding, a fresh and specific occasion to make itself loud again. There were other moments across those 11 years worth telling you about. Small moments that, taken together, formed the long, slow texture of a grief that never fully resolved itself into either hope or acceptance, but instead lived somewhere uneasily between the two. I remember a particular Christmas, perhaps 4 years after she disappeared, when my youngest grandson, not yet old enough to understand the full weight of what our family had lost, asked me at the dinner table, with the blunt honesty small children carry before the world teaches them otherwise, whether Grandma Ruth was ever coming back. The table went silent, forks pausing halfway to mouths, and I remember looking down at that small, earnest face and telling him, as gently and as honestly as I knew how, that I did not know, that some things in this life do not come with answers, only with the patience to keep waiting for them, and that we would keep a place for her at our table for as long as it took, whether that was 1 more year or 50. He seemed to accept this answer with the easy resilience of childhood, returning to his supper within moments. But I noticed Ruth's sister, seated across the table, wipe quickly at her eyes, and I wondered, not for the first time, what private grief or private knowledge lay behind that particular reaction. I want to tell you about Mr. Hartley, too, the detective, because his role in this story did not end with that difficult conversation at my kitchen table, telling me there was little more to be done. He kept in touch with our family for years afterward. An unusual devotion for a man whose caseload, I imagine, moved on to dozens of other investigations in the years that followed. He would send a letter, perhaps twice a year, simply checking in, asking whether anything new had surfaced, offering what small updates he had, which amounted, across those years, to almost nothing at all. No new leads, no new evidence, only the steady confirmation that the case remained officially open and officially unsolved. I came to look forward to those letters in a strange way, not because they ever brought news, but because they were a reminder that somewhere outside our own community, someone else still remembered, still wondered, still held Ruth's disappearance as an unfinished question rather than a settled tragedy. When I finally called him, 11 years later, to tell him what we had found, he told me he had never once, in all those years, closed the file in his own mind, even after it had long since gone cold in the official records, and that he had always believed, on some instinct he could not fully explain even to himself, that there was more to Ruth's story than a simple runaway wife or a simple unexplained accident. I also want to tell you about the particular loneliness of the anniversary each year, the day in late October when the whole community, without ever quite saying so aloud, seemed to grow a little quieter, a little more careful with me. Neighbors finding small excuses to stop by with a pie or an offer of help with some chore, as though the whole district had silently agreed to close ranks around me on that one difficult day each year. Understanding without needing to be told that the specific date carried a weight the rest of the calendar did not. I came, over the years, to be grateful for this unspoken kindness even as I dreaded the day itself, the way a person can hold both gratitude and dread for the same recurring event. Each October bringing with it a fresh accounting of exactly how long it had now been. 1 year becoming 2, 2 becoming 5, 5 becoming the unimaginable span of a full decade. Each milestone marked quietly, privately, in the particular way I would find myself standing at the kitchen window on that morning each year, looking out at the same view Ruth must have been looking at, or turned away from, in whatever final moment preceded her disappearance. Now I need to tell you about the day everything changed, and I need you to stay with me through this part, because it did not happen the way I expected, and it did not happen quickly. It happened slowly, the way most true things do, one small detail at a time, until suddenly all the small details were standing together, and I could see the whole shape of what they had been trying to tell me all along. The way a puzzle only becomes a picture once enough of its pieces have finally found their place. It began with my youngest granddaughter, my youngest daughter's child, a bright girl of 16 who had taken an interest in old books in the particular intense way that some teenagers latch onto a hobby, spending her evenings poring over whatever old volumes she could find in our attic or borrow from neighboring families, fascinated by the handwriting and the pressed flowers, and the small marginal notes that previous generations had left scattered through their family Bibles and hymnals. She had asked if she might look through Ruth's Bible sometime, since she loved the pressed flowers Ruth used to keep between certain pages. Little mementos from gardens long gone. Flowers Ruth had pressed and saved across the decades of her marriage. A violet from the year our eldest son was born. A sprig of lavender from the summer Sarah Fisher first brought her into the district. Small physical fragments of a life my granddaughter had never known her grandmother to live, but had heard about. In fragments and stories, her whole young life. I gave her permission, of course, glad in a quiet way to see a piece of Ruth's life drawing the interest of a new generation, and sat with her at the kitchen table one evening while she turned the pages slowly, careful the way you learn to be careful with things that belonged to someone you loved and lost, her young hands moving with a gentleness that reminded me, painfully and sweetly at once, of her grandmother's own careful hands. She found the pressed flowers one by one, exclaiming softly over each discovery. A violet, a bit of clover, a rose petal gone the color of old parchment, laying each one carefully on a clean cloth I had fetched for the purpose, already imagining, I think, some future project of preserving them properly. And then, near the back of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, working her way toward the end papers with the same careful attention she had given every other page, she found something that was not a flower at all. It was a seam, a place where the end paper at the very back cover had been carefully lifted and then glued back down, so carefully that in all my years of holding that Bible, running my own thumbs over its cover more times than I could count in 11 years of nightly reading, I had never once noticed it. My granddaughter, with the sharp eyes of the young and the particular attentiveness of someone who had spent months learning to notice small details in old paper, noticed it because a corner had begun to peel with age. Just slightly. Just enough to catch the light differently than the rest of the page when she tilted the book toward the lamp. "Grandpa," she said, her voice carrying a curiosity that had not yet turned to alarm, "look at this. It's not glued right here." I leaned over to look where her finger pointed, and I confess that even then, even seeing it with my own eyes, I did not immediately understand what I was looking at. I thought perhaps it was simply a manufacturing flaw, some imperfection in the binding that had gone unnoticed for decades, or a spot where the glue had dried unevenly and begun to release with age, the way old bindings sometimes do. It was my granddaughter who pressed further, running her fingernail gently along the loosened edge, feeling, as she described it to me, a faint but distinct thickness beneath the paper that should not have been there if the end paper were simply glued flat against the cover board as it should have been. I want to tell you honestly that my hands were shaking before we had even decided to open it further, before we had even fully articulated to each other what we suspected we might find. Some part of me already understood. In that particular way, a body sometimes understands things before the mind has caught up to name them. that we were about to find the locked door I had sensed all those years ago, the room in Ruth's heart she had never invited me into, the answer that had been sitting on my own nightstand every single night for 11 years, while I read the Psalms aloud into an empty room and prayed for a morning that never came. I almost told my granddaughter to stop, to leave it be, out of some old fear that whatever was behind that door might undo the peace I had slowly, painfully built for myself over 11 years of grieving a woman who was neither confirmed dead nor confirmed alive, a fragile, hard-won piece that had taken me the better part of a decade to construct out of daily routine and quiet faith, and the simple, stubborn discipline of continuing to rise each morning and do the work in front of me. I almost told her to close the Bible, to put it back on the nightstand exactly as it was, to let whatever secret it held remain sealed the way it had apparently been sealed for so many years already. But I did not stop her. I think some part of me had been waiting 11 years for exactly this moment. Some part of me that had never fully believed, despite every outward appearance of acceptance I had offered the world, that Ruth's story was finished, that the locked door would simply stay locked forever, without ever once creaking open on its hinges. I was not going to turn away from it now, not after 11 years of watching and waiting. Not after 11 years of Psalms recited into an empty room. Go on, I told my granddaughter, and my voice, when I heard it, sounded steadier than I felt. Let's see what it is. We worked the seam apart with the flat edge of a butter knife, slow and gentle. The way you would open something you were not sure you were allowed to open. My granddaughter holding the Bible steady on the table while I worked the blade carefully beneath the loosened edge of the end paper, feeling it give, millimeter by millimeter, the old glue releasing its decades-long hold with small, dry, cracking sounds that seemed, in the quiet of our kitchen, almost impossibly loud. Neither of us spoke during this process. I remember the only sound in the room being the soft, persistent ticking of the kitchen clock and the occasional creak of the old house settling around us. And beneath both of those sounds, my own heartbeat, which I could feel distinctly in my ears. A rushing, thudding rhythm that seemed to match the trembling in my hands. And there, pressed flat inside the lining of the back cover, in a cavity so shallow and so carefully constructed that it must have taken Ruth considerable skill and considerable patience to create it without leaving any visible trace, was a small collection of papers, folded so many times they had become almost soft, like cloth, the creases worn pale and thin from what must have been repeated folding and unfolding over years before they were finally sealed away for good. There was also something else, resting alongside the papers, a small brass key, tarnished with age but unmistakably real, the kind that does not fit any lock in an Amish household, the kind of key that belongs to something English, something modern, something from a world we did not keep in our home, its shape entirely foreign among the plain wooden furniture and hand-stitched quilts of our farmhouse kitchen. I lifted the papers out first, my granddaughter watching in silence beside me. Her earlier curiosity now sobered into something closer to my own dawning apprehension. My hands were not steady enough to unfold them properly on my own, and I asked her, my voice barely above a whisper, to help me. Since my eyes are not what they once were, and my old fingers, thick and clumsy with age and nerves both, could not manage the delicate work of separating pages that had been folded so many times and left untouched for so many years without risking tearing them. The papers, once we unfolded them together at the table, spreading them out with as much care as two people can manage when their hands are both shaking for entirely different reasons, turned out to be three things, 3 separate pieces of a story I had never once been permitted to see, laid out now in the lamplight of my own kitchen like the scattered fragments of a life I had loved without ever fully knowing. The first was a birth certificate, official and English in its formatting, a document unlike anything I had ever handled before. The paper heavier and glossier than the plain paper we used in our own community, stamped with an official seal from a county clerk's office in a state 300 miles from our farm. It was not for Ruth Fisher, the name I had known her by for 40 years of marriage, the name on our own marriage certificate, the name on the birth certificates of our 4 children. It was for a woman named Rachel Ann Whitmore, born in a city I had never visited. A city whose name I had to ask my granddaughter to read aloud to me twice before it settled properly in my memory. Born nearly 2 years before the date I had always understood to be Ruth's birthday. A discrepancy that told me, even in that first stunned moment, that even the age she had given me across 4 decades of marriage had not been entirely the truth, or had perhaps been altered along with everything else when Sarah Fisher first brought her into our world. The second was a newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle, folded so many times it nearly fell apart in my hands, despite my best efforts to handle it gently. The print faded nearly to illegibility in places where the folds had worn thinnest. My granddaughter read it aloud to me, her young voice going carefully slow and careful over the unfamiliar names. A short article about a young woman named Rachel Whitmore, who had testified against her own father in a criminal trial when she was 16 years old. A trial involving fraud and violence that had sent several men to prison for a very long time. Men with connections that the article described only vaguely, in the cautious language of a small regional newspaper, unwilling to print anything it could. Not fully substantiate, as dangerous, as far-reaching, as the kind of men who did not forgive a betrayal even after their prison sentences ended. The article gave few details of the trial itself, focusing more on the unusual bravery of a teenage girl willing to testify against her own blood, a girl the article described. In one particular line my granddaughter read twice, because neither of us quite believed it the first time, as having entered protective custody immediately following her testimony, and having, in the reporter's careful words, essentially vanished from public record thereafter. I sat with that clipping for a long while, turning it over in my hands, trying to reconcile the 16-year-old girl described in that faded print. A girl brave enough or desperate enough to stand up in a courtroom and speak the truth about her own father, with the woman I had known for 40 years. The woman who hummed hymns while she canned tomatoes. The woman who had corrected my clumsy stitches at a quilting frolic with such gentle patience that I fell in love with her before I even properly knew her name. It did not seem possible, in that first raw hour, that these were the same person, and yet even as I resisted the idea, some deeper part of me recognized, with a kind of dawning horror and a kind of dawning tenderness both at once, that of course they were the same person, that every flinch at an unfamiliar car, every guarded quiet on that long-ago porch, every packed bag hidden behind the linen closet quilts, had been the visible surface of exactly this submerged history. A history so much larger and so much more frightening than anything I had ever let myself imagine during all those years of quietly wondering. The third paper was a letter, and this is the one that undid me completely, because it was written in Ruth's own hand, the same careful, looping script I had watched write shopping lists and birthday cards and notes tucked into my coat pockets for 4 decades. The same handwriting that had signed our marriage certificate, that had labeled jars of apple butter in the cellar, that had written out, year after year, The small tender notes she used to leave on the kitchen table on mornings when she rose before me and wanted me to know, before I even made it down the stairs, that she loved me. It was dated only 3 days before she disappeared, the ink slightly smudged in places, as though the hand that wrote it had trembled, or as though tears had fallen onto the page before the ink was fully dry. I asked my granddaughter, gently, if she would give me a moment alone with the letter before we continued, and she rose without a word, her own eyes bright with unshed tears, and busied herself at the stove making a pot of tea, giving me the privacy I needed while staying close enough that I would not be entirely alone with whatever the letter contained. I sat at that table for what felt like a very long time before I could bring myself to actually read it, the folded pages resting in my trembling hands. The weight of 11 years of unanswered questions pressing down on me all at once, and when I finally did begin to read, I found that I could not read it silently, that the words demanded to be spoken aloud, as though Ruth herself were finally, after 11 years of silence, ready to speak to me directly. And I owed it to her and to myself to hear her voice, even secondhand, even 11 years too late. I will share with you now what that letter said, as close to word for word as my memory allows, because I have read it so many times since that day, in the weeks and months that followed, sitting alone at that same kitchen table, long after my granddaughter had gone home to her own family, that I believe I could recite it in my sleep, that its particular rhythms and turns of phrase have become as familiar to me as scripture, worn smooth in my memory, the way a stone is worn smooth, by a river that returns to it, again and again. She wrote that if I was ever reading this, it meant that the past she had spent her whole adult life trying to bury had finally come looking for her, and that she needed me to understand, before anything else, before any explanation of what had happened or why, that she had never once regretted a single day of our marriage. She wrote that loving me, and raising our children, and building our small, quiet life together on that little farm at the edge of my father's land had been the truest and best thing she had ever done. Truer even than the frightened girl she had been before Sarah Fisher found her wandering, alone and terrified, near a bus station 3 counties over. A girl with nothing to her name but a small bag of belongings, and a fear so large it had swallowed every other feeling she owned, and brought her home, and gave her a new name, and a new family, and a new faith to disappear into. A faith that had become, over the years, not merely a disguise, but a genuine home for her own battered and searching soul. She wrote that a man had come to the district 2 weeks before she disappeared, an Englishman she did not recognize at first, who had asked strange questions at the general store about Amish families who had taken in outsiders decades earlier. Questions that had been reported back to her, as such things always eventually are in a close community, by a shopkeeper who thought nothing of the odd inquiry, but mentioned it to Ruth in passing, simply because she happened to be present at the counter that same afternoon, buying thread. She wrote that something in the description of the man, his manner, his particular way of phrasing his questions, had struck a cold note of recognition in her, a recognition she tried at first to dismiss as simple paranoia, the residue of old fears she had spent decades learning to set aside. She wrote that she had seen him a second time, several days later, watching our farm from the tree line at dusk, a stationary shape among the trees that she noticed only because she happened to glance up from the garden at exactly the right moment. A shape that resolved itself, as she watched, into unmistakably the outline of a man standing very still, watching our house in the particular unhurried way of someone who has all the time in the world and intends to use it. She wrote that she had known, in the particular deep-bone way that a person knows danger when they have lived alongside it once before. That the men her testimony had helped convict all those years ago, or their sons, or the associates who had sworn revenge at the trial's end. Revenge she had been warned about explicitly by the marshals who once protected her, had finally found her after 26 years of careful hiding, after a lifetime built so painstakingly on top of a name that was never truly hers. She wrote that she could not risk staying, because staying meant risking not just herself, but me, and our children, and our grandchildren, and the entire peaceful district that had taken her in and asked no questions, and loved her without condition for 26 years. She wrote that she had spent 3 sleepless nights turning the decision over in her mind, praying over it in the quiet hours after I had fallen asleep beside her, weighing every possible course of action against every other, and that in the end she had concluded there was only one path that did not put the people she loved most in the world directly in harm's way. She wrote that she had contacted, through a phone at the hardware store in town that the English clerk let her use in secret, a kindness she never forgot and prayed daily that the Lord would repay him for, a federal marshal who had been involved in her case decades earlier, a man who still, even after all those years, maintained some manner of contact with witnesses who had once needed protecting. A courtesy she had not expected to still be extended after so much time had passed, but that she had clung to as her only remaining thread back to safety. She wrote that he had arranged, in a matter of days, working with the particular urgency such situations demand, to relocate her under a new identity, far from our district, far from everything and everyone she loved, and that she had agonized, more than any other part of this decision, over whether to tell me and risk putting the burden of that terrible secret on my shoulders, forcing me to either lie convincingly to protect her, or to somehow disappear alongside her and abandon everything we had built together for our children, or to disappear without a word and let me believe, cruelly but safely, that I simply did not know where she had gone, that my ignorance itself would become a kind of shield. She chose the second, she wrote, because if the men looking for her ever came to question me, and she believed, based on everything the marshal told her about how such men typically operated, that they very well might, she needed my ignorance to be real and not performed. Because a person cannot fully hide a truth they know. Not from men trained to read faces. Not from men whose entire livelihood depended on extracting information from people who believed they were concealing it well. But they can protect a truth they were never given to hide in the first place. She wrote that this reasoning had cost her more grief than anything else in her entire life, that choosing to let me suffer 11 years, or however many years it turned out to be, of genuine not knowing, of genuine believing myself abandoned or bereaved without ever being certain which, was the single hardest decision she had ever made, harder even than testifying against her own father all those years before, because that decision had only cost her, while this one, she knew, would cost me too, and cost our children. And there was no way to soften that cost, only to bear it, and to trust that someday, if she survived long enough, she might be able to explain herself and beg my forgiveness for the years of silence she was about to impose upon us both. She wrote that she loved me more than she had ever had the words to say, more than any hymn or any psalm had ever given her adequate language for, that she hoped someday, when it was safe, she might find a way to reach me again, but that she could make no promises, because the marshal had told her that a truly safe new life meant cutting every single thread back to the old one, including every letter, every phone call, every small comfort that might allow someone searching for her to trace a path back to our farm, and to me, including. And this was the sentence that broke something loose in my chest that I had held tightly closed for 11 years. Something I felt give way inside me with an almost physical sensation, like a rope finally snapping after being pulled taut for far too long, including the thread that led back to me. The key, the letter explained, opened a small post office box in a town 2 counties over, one she had rented under a false name years before any of this ever happened. A quiet precaution she had kept ever since Sarah Fisher first told her. On her deathbed, in whatever final private conversation had passed between the two of them in those last hours, that danger sometimes waits decades before it remembers your name. That a person who has once been marked for harm should never fully believe herself safe, no matter how many peaceful years pass in between. She wrote that if I ever found this letter, I should go to that box, because she had left one final thing there for me. Something she could not risk keeping in our home. Something too dangerous to leave anywhere near the family she was trying to protect. She closed the letter with words I will not fully share here, because some part of what she wrote at the very end belongs only to Ruth and to me. A private benediction between a wife and a husband that I have chosen to keep for myself. The one small corner of this whole story I am not willing to hand over, even to all of you who have been so faithfully following along with me. But I will tell you that the last line, the very last thing her hand wrote on that page before she folded it for what she must have believed, in that terrible moment, might be the final time, was a promise, uncertain and fragile but sincerely meant, that wherever she ended up, whatever name she was forced to carry, some part of her heart would remain permanently on that little farm at the edge of my father's land, humming an old hymn into an empty kitchen, waiting for a morning that might never come, but that she would hope for anyway, for as many years as she was given. I sat at that kitchen table for a long while after reading the letter for the first time, simply holding the pages in my hands, feeling the weight of 11 years pressing down on me all at once. A strange, disorienting mixture of grief and relief and fury and love, all arriving in the same moment, so tangled together that I could not separate one feeling from another. Could not have told you, if you had asked me in that instant, whether I was more devastated or more grateful. Whether the dominant feeling in my chest was heartbreak at everything she had suffered alone, or something closer to joy at finally understanding that she had never, not for one single day, stopped loving me. My granddaughter sat beside me by then, having finished with the tea and returned quietly to the table, her hand resting on my arm the way her grandmothers used to rest on mine on those long-ago porch evenings. And I found myself, an old man of 69 years, weeping openly at my own kitchen table for the first time since the earliest weeks of Ruth's disappearance. Weeping, not merely from grief, but from something closer to awe at the sheer scale of what my quiet, gentle wife had carried alone, silently, for the better part of her entire life. I thought about every whisper I had ever heard in our district, every unkind word spoken about a woman who had supposedly grown tired of her plain life and run off to something easier. And I felt, sitting there with her letter in my hands, a fierce and sudden protectiveness rise up in me, an old man's anger on behalf of a wife who could not defend herself, who had spent the last 11 years unable to correct a single unkind word spoken about her in her absence. I thought about how wrong they had all been, how the truth was so much braver, and so much harder than anything any of them had imagined in their idle speculation over quilting frames and fence lines. Ruth had not run from her life with me. She had run to protect it, to protect all of us, at the cost of everything she loved most, at the cost of 11 years of her own children's weddings and her own grandchildren's births, at the cost of every single ordinary Tuesday she might otherwise have spent in that same kitchen, humming her hymns, canning her tomatoes, reaching for my hand beneath our quilt each night. I thought too about old Sarah Fisher and the small wooden box Ruth had carried so carefully at her funeral all those years earlier, refusing to let anyone else touch it, both arms wrapped around it the whole long walk from the buggies to the burial ground. I understood now, sitting at that table with the whole shape of the story finally visible before me, that the box must have held pieces of this same story, papers and mementos from the life Rachel Whitmore had lived before she became Ruth Fisher, entrusted to her by the one woman who had known the truth from the very beginning and had carried that secret faithfully to her own grave without ever once betraying it. Not even to me. Not even in 40 years of watching me love and marry and build a whole life alongside a daughter she alone knew the full truth about. I found myself wondering, in the days that followed, exactly how Sarah Fisher had come to take Ruth in the first place. What arrangement or what quiet understanding had passed between the widow and whatever authorities had been managing Rachel Whitmore's protection all those years ago. Whether Sarah had known from the very beginning the full weight of what she was agreeing to shelter, or whether she too had learned the truth only gradually, the way I myself had learned it, in careful pieces offered across years of trust slowly built. I would never fully know the answer to this question, since Sarah had taken whatever she knew with her into her own grave, but I came to believe, turning the matter over many times in the months that followed, that Sarah Fisher must have understood exactly what she was doing when she brought that frightened 17-year-old girl home from wherever she had found her, must have understood the risk she herself was accepting on behalf of our entire district, and had chosen, out of whatever deep well of compassion drove so much of her quiet generosity across her whole long life, to accept that risk anyway, to give a hunted girl a name and a home and a faith substantial enough to disappear inside of. I wished, in that moment at my kitchen table, and in many moments afterward, that I could go back and ask Sarah every question I had never thought to ask her while she lived, could sit with her one more time and thank her properly for the courage it must have taken to make that choice, for the discretion it must have taken to keep it faithfully for so many decades, for the particular grace of raising a broken, hunted girl into a woman capable of the kind of steady, patient love that had first drawn my eye across a crowded wedding barn all those years ago. I understood, too, sitting with that grief and that gratitude both, why she had never told me herself, not even in the years after Ruth and I were married, not even as our own children were born and raised within sight of her own farm. Some secrets are not ours to give away, even out of kindness, even to the husband of the woman they belonged to. And Sarah Fisher, whatever else she was, had clearly understood this principle with a depth and a discipline that I have come, in the years since, to deeply respect, even as I still occasionally wish, selfishly, that she had found some way to prepare me, however slightly, for what I would one day discover on my own. I did not sleep that night. I do not think I slept for several nights after that, my mind turning over and over the whole shape of the story, examining it from every angle, revisiting every memory of our 40 years together in light of this new understanding, watching old moments rearrange themselves into new patterns, the way scattered pieces of a puzzle suddenly cohere, once enough of the picture has become visible. That evening on the porch, all those years ago, when I had asked her, half in jest, whether she had ever been sweet on a boy before she came to our district, and she had grown quiet in that particular guarded way. The flinch at unfamiliar cars, the packed bag behind the linen closet quilts, the strange, practiced calm with which she had cleaned our daughter's scraped knee, a calm I now understood had likely been trained into her, in some capacity, during whatever protective process had followed her testimony all those years ago. Every single one of these moments, which I had noted and set aside without ever fully connecting them, now stood together in my memory like a row of lanterns finally lit, illuminating a path I had walked beside for 40 years without ever quite seeing where it led. My granddaughter, bless her steady young heart, kept the secret with me during those first difficult days, sitting with me at that kitchen table each evening as I worked through the shock and the grief and the slowly dawning hope of what we had found, offering the particular quiet, undemanding companionship that only the young seem able to give an old man in genuine distress, asking no questions I was not ready to answer, simply being present. She helped me decide, over those first several days, how I wanted to proceed, both of us understanding, without ever fully articulating it, that this discovery was too large and too consequential to act upon carelessly, that whatever Ruth had left for me in that post office box deserved to be approached with the same care and the same deliberation she herself had clearly used in hiding it in the first place. Eventually, I asked my eldest son to drive me, in a car borrowed from an English neighbor, since the town 2 counties over was too far for a comfortable buggy trip, and the matter felt, to both of us, too urgent to entrust to the slower pace of a horse. I told him only that I had found something important in his mother's old Bible, something I needed to see through to its end before I could explain it fully even to him. And to his great credit, he asked no further questions, simply nodded and went to arrange the car for the following morning, trusting me the way our children had always trusted me, even in the depths of those 11 uncertain years. The drive itself felt strange and long, though it could not have taken more than an hour by car, a distance that would have been an entire day's journey by buggy. I sat in the passenger seat with the small brass key held tightly in my closed fist the whole way, watching unfamiliar English towns pass by the window, gas stations and grocery stores and houses built close together in ways so different from the wide, spread out farms of our own district, and I found myself thinking, with a strange detached curiosity even in the middle of my own private turmoil, about all the years Ruth must have spent moving through towns exactly like these, under a name that was not her own, carrying a grief for our family that she could never once speak aloud to anyone around her. We found the post office without much trouble, my son parking the borrowed car in a small lot out front, while I sat for a moment gathering myself before going inside. The post office itself was a small, unremarkable brick building, nothing like the grand structures I had half expected from some corner of my imagination that had turned this whole errand into something closer to a pilgrimage than a simple errand to collect mail. Inside, rows of small brass boxes lined one wall, numbered in neat sequence, and I found the number that matched the one stamped faintly into the head of the key. A number I had memorized during the drive over out of some superstitious fear that I might otherwise lose track of it in the moment that mattered most. I want to tell you honestly that I sat in that borrowed car in the post office parking lot for nearly an hour before I could bring myself to actually turn that key in the lock. My son waiting patiently beside me without a single word of impatience, understanding, I think, without needing to be told, that whatever I was steeling myself to do required a kind of courage that could not be rushed. I thought about all the years that box had been sitting there, quietly holding whatever Ruth had left inside it, waiting through 11 autumns and 11 winters and 11 springs for a hand that might never come to claim it. And I found myself almost afraid, in that final hour of hesitation, that opening it would somehow undo the fragile, hopeful peace that had begun to settle over me in the days since finding her letter, that whatever waited inside might complicate, rather than resolve the story I had only just begun to understand. But eventually, with my son's steady hand briefly resting on my shoulder, I made myself go back inside, and with hands that would not stop trembling, turned that small brass key in a lock that had been waiting 11 years to be opened, the mechanism catching stiffly at first, and then giving way with a small metallic click that seemed, in that quiet post office lobby, impossibly loud. Inside was a single envelope, plain and unmarked, and inside that envelope was a phone number with no name attached, written in Ruth's familiar hand on a small slip of paper, and a note, also in her handwriting, that said only, "If you are reading this, it means enough time has passed and enough truth has surfaced that I finally feel it is safe to say I am still here, and I have never once stopped loving you, and I have prayed every single night, the way we used to pray together, that this day would come." I read that note perhaps a dozen times standing right there in the post office lobby, my son quietly reading it over my shoulder, both of us too overcome to speak for a long moment, before he finally suggested, gently, that we return to the car, where I might have a bit more privacy to collect myself. I will tell you honestly that I sat in that borrowed car in the post office parking lot for nearly another hour before I could bring myself to dial that number, my son having found a nearby diner where he waited with a cup of coffee to give me the privacy he sensed I needed for this particular call, though he made me promise to come find him the moment I was ready, unwilling to leave his old father alone for too long. In a moment of such consequence, I was afraid, I think, that it would ring and ring into nothing, that 11 years had made the number obsolete, disconnected, reassigned to some stranger who would answer with confusion and leave me no better off than before, that I would be met only with silence the way I had been met with silence for so long already, a silence I had learned, across 11 years, to survive, but never fully to accept. But I dialed it, my fingers clumsy and uncertain on the unfamiliar buttons of a payphone outside the diner, since our own people do not carry telephones, and I had to ask a passing stranger to show me how the machine worked. A small English kindness in the middle of an enormous private moment, and it rang twice, only twice, before a voice answered that I would have known anywhere, in any lifetime, across any distance of years. A voice that had softened with age, but had lost none of its gentleness, none of its warmth. The exact same voice that had once corrected my clumsy stitches at a quilting frolic and hummed unfamiliar tunes on a summer porch, and read Ruth's own name into our children's ears at every bedtime prayer, for as long as we lived together as husband and wife. "Hello," she said, uncertain. The voice of someone who had likely received very few calls to this particular number in recent years, and answered it now with the careful caution of a person who has spent a long time being careful about which calls she answers and how. And I said her name, just her name, unable in that first moment to manage any other word at all, and there was a silence on the other end of the line so long and so total that I feared for one terrible instant the call had somehow disconnected. And then she began to cry, a sound I recognized instantly despite 11 years of not hearing it, and so did I, standing there at that payphone with tears running freely down my face in the middle of an unfamiliar English parking lot. husband, my son, who had come back out from the diner at exactly that moment to check on me, had to guide me gently to a nearby bench because neither of us, in that overwhelmed moment, trusted my legs to hold me steady much longer. We spoke for a long while that first call, though I could not tell you now, looking back, exactly how long, since time seemed to bend strangely around that conversation. Both of us talking over each other in our eagerness, both of us falling silent for long stretches, simply to listen to the other breathe, as though confirming, again and again, that this was truly happening, that the voice on the other end of the line truly belonged to the wife I had grieved and waited for across 11 impossible years. She told me, in that first call, only the barest outline of what had happened to her in the years since she left, promising a fuller accounting when it was safer to give one, and I told her, in halting, overwhelmed fragments, about our children, about our grandchildren, about the granddaughter who had found the seam in her old Bible and set this whole reunion into motion with nothing more than a sharp young eye and a love of pressed flowers. "I need you to know," she said to me, partway through that first call, her voice steadier now though still thick with tears, "that not one single day passed, not one, where I did not think of you, and think of our children, and wonder whether I had made the right choice in leaving the way I did." I told her, with a certainty I felt down to my bones, that she had made the only choice that could have kept us all safe, and that whatever grief the last 11 years had cost either of us, I did not for one moment blame her for the decision she had made, a decision I now understood had cost her infinitely more than it had cost me, since I at least had our children and our grandchildren and our community to hold me through the long years of not knowing, while she had held her own grief entirely alone, under a stranger's name, in towns where no one around her had any idea what she had sacrificed or why. I am not going to tell you every detail of what came after, partly because some of it belongs only to Ruth and to me, and partly because some of the details, even now, remain sensitive, tied up as they are with federal protections and old criminal cases that some of those dangerous men's family members may still be watching for. Cases that involve legal considerations I do not fully understand myself, and that our lawyer, retained through the marshal's office to help guide our family through the months that followed, advised us to keep private even from our own closest friends and neighbors. But I will tell you this much, because I think it matters for anyone listening tonight who has ever wondered whether a threat like the one Ruth faced can ever truly resolve itself, whether a person can ever truly stop running. The threat that had driven her away had finally, truly passed. One of the men involved, the article's central figure alongside her own father, had died of natural causes the year before we found the letter, a fact the marshal's office confirmed through channels I do not fully understand, but trust completely, having earned that trust through the sheer diligence with which they handled every other part of our reunion. Another had been returned to prison on unrelated charges, removing him from any position to pursue old grievances, even if he had wished to. A third, the man Ruth had spotted watching our farm from the tree line that terrible October, had been identified by investigators as a low-level associate, acting largely on his own initiative, rather than as part of any organized continuing threat. A man who had since relocated out of state and showed no further interest, as far as the marshal's ongoing monitoring could determine, in pursuing the matter further. The federal marshal who had helped her all those years ago, now retired, but still in contact with her in an informal, almost fatherly capacity that Ruth described to me later with real affection, confirmed that the danger which had once justified her complete disappearance had faded enough over the accumulated weight of so many intervening years that a careful, quiet reunion could finally be considered safe, provided we took certain sensible precautions in how we handled the transition. Precautions our own bishop, once he was brought fully into our confidence, helped us think through with the same steady wisdom he had shown throughout every other difficult season of our community's life. In the weeks leading up to her actual return, weeks that felt to me both impossibly long and impossibly short all at once, the Federal Marshal's Office arranged everything with great care, since even a joyful reunion required caution when so much of Ruth's protection had depended on secrecy for so long, and no one wanted to undo 26 years of careful concealment through a single careless slip in those final weeks. There were quiet conversations with our bishop, who, after much prayer and much deliberation with the other ministers of our district, a process that took several long meetings and no small amount of soul searching among men unaccustomed to weighing matters of federal witness protection against the ordinary discipline of our faith, agreed that Ruth could be received back into our faith and our district, understanding as he did the extraordinary circumstances that had taken her from us in the first place, circumstances so far outside anything our ministers had ever had to consider before, that they spent, I later learned, considerable time in prayer, simply trying to understand how our tradition's teachings on truthfulness and transparency between husband and wife applied to a situation none of our forebears could ever have imagined. There were long telephone calls between Ruth and myself in the weeks before she came home. Calls made from the hardware store telephone, since we do not keep such things in our own house. Calls arranged in advance through careful coordination with the marshal's office. Always at times when the store would be quiet, and I could speak without being overheard by curious neighbors not yet privy to what our family had discovered. Some of these calls were long and full of catching up. Ruth wanting to hear every detail of 11 years of grandchildren's birthdays and harvests and small community happenings she had missed. And me wanting to hear, in whatever careful pieces she felt able to share, some accounting of the strange, hidden life she had lived under names that were never truly hers. Other calls, I confess, were mostly silence, both of us simply listening to the other breathe, unable to find words large enough for 11 years of separation, content in those moments simply to know the other was there, present, real, no longer merely a memory or a grief, but an actual living voice on the other end of a telephone line. Telling our children was in some ways harder than anything else in that entire strange season, harder even than the 11 years of grief that had preceded it, because it required me to ask them to hold two enormous and somewhat contradictory feelings at once. An overwhelming joy at learning their mother was alive and had never stopped loving them, tangled together with a real and understandable hurt at having been left for 11 long years to believe otherwise. I gathered them together at our farmhouse on a Sunday afternoon, all four of them along with their spouses, my English son having made the long drive back for the occasion once I explained, over a telephone call to his own home, that something extraordinary had happened and that he needed to come. I remember the particular silence that fell over that room when I finished explaining what we had found, a silence that stretched long enough to become uncomfortable before my eldest son finally spoke, his voice thick with an emotion he did not try to hide, asking simply, "She's alive," not quite a question. More a fact he needed to hear spoken aloud by someone else before he could fully believe it himself. Our children, grown now with children of their own, had to work through complicated feelings in the weeks and months that followed. Joy tangled together with a strange kind of anger at having been left in the dark for so long. An anger I understood completely and never once tried to talk them out of, believing as I did that they had every right to feel whatever they felt about the 11 years their mother's absence had cost them. Cost their own children. Cost every ordinary family gathering and holiday and small daily moment that Ruth had been forced to miss in the name of keeping them safe. My quilting daughter, in particular, struggled the longest with this tangled grief, telling me once, in a private conversation on my own porch some months after the reunion, that she found herself unable to fully separate her joy at her mother's return from a lingering resentment she was ashamed to feel and could not quite set down. A resentment at having grown up, in some sense. Motherless during the very years when she herself became a mother, without ever having the chance to ask her own mother the questions every new mother wants answered. But every single one of them came in time to understand why she had done what she did, working through their complicated grief with the same patient discipline our faith has always taught us to bring to forgiveness, and to forgive her fully. Though I will tell you it took some of them longer than others, my quilting daughter needing the better part of a year of careful, gentle conversations with her mother before the last of that resentment finally softened into something closer to peace. My English son, interestingly, seemed to reconcile himself to the news more quickly than any of his siblings, perhaps because his own choice to leave our faith had already given him some private, hard-won understanding of what it meant to make an enormous life-altering decision in service of a truth larger than the comfort of the people you love. A parallel he mentioned to me only once, quietly, but that I have thought about often since. Ruth came home in the spring, nearly a full year after my granddaughter first found that seam in the back cover of an old Bible. The delay a necessary consequence of all the careful legal and logistical arrangements required to formally close out the protective measures that had governed her life for so long. Arrangements that involved lawyers and marshals and forms I did not fully understand, but signed wherever I was told to sign them, trusting the process because I trusted the people guiding us through it. I will not pretend that our reunion healed instantly, or that the 11 years apart simply folded up and disappeared the way her old identity once had, tucked away behind a false name and a borrowed life. We were both older, both changed by grief, and by secrets neither of us had chosen to carry, and it took months of careful, patient rebuilding before the easy, comfortable rhythm of our old marriage began to return. Both of us relearning small things about the other, small habits and preferences that 11 years apart had quietly altered in each of us. I will tell you what I remember most from the day she came back, since I have been asked, more than once by curious viewers of this very channel, to describe that reunion in detail. Though I confess it is difficult to capture fully in words. It was not the tears, though there were plenty of those. Both of us weeping openly the moment the car bringing her from the marshal's office turned up our familiar gravel lane. Our whole gathered family standing in the yard to witness her return. My grandchildren too young to fully remember her holding back shyly at first, unsure how to greet a grandmother they had only ever known through stories, while my older grandchildren rushed forward without hesitation the moment she stepped from the car. It was not the tears that I remember most clearly, but rather the sound of her feet on our kitchen floorboards, that same particular rhythm I had memorized 40 years earlier and had thought I would never hear again, moving across the room to where I sat waiting, having deliberately positioned myself in my old chair by the stove, so that our first private moment together, after the larger family greeting outside, could happen in the same kitchen where our whole life together had once unfolded. She knelt down in front of my chair, an old woman kneeling in front of an old man, both of us with more gray hair and more lines on our faces than either of us had worn the last time we stood in that kitchen together, and she took my hands in hers. Her grip as familiar and as steady as it had ever been, despite everything the intervening years had cost her. and she said, "I never stopped being your wife. Not for one single day." And I told her, my voice breaking on every word, that I had never stopped being her husband either. That I had kept her side of the bed exactly as she left it. That I had read her Bible almost every night of those 11 years, without ever once suspecting what it was quietly holding for me the entire time. Our wider community, once the necessary explanations had been carefully shared with the bishop, and in time, with the district as a whole, received her back with a grace that moved me deeply, though I should not have been surprised, since this is a community built on forgiveness and on the belief that every soul deserves welcome, regardless of the burdens it carries. There were, inevitably, a few who struggled with the strangeness of it all. A few older members of our district who found it difficult to reconcile our tradition's teachings on plainness and transparency with a story so tangled up in English courts and federal marshals and hidden identities. But even these few, in time, softened, won over by simply watching Ruth resume her old life among them, tending her garden, singing her hymns, sitting once again in her old place at worship, until the strangeness of her return became, gradually, simply another thread in the long fabric of our community's shared history. Remarkable, but no longer unsettling. In the years since, Ruth and I have rebuilt our life together slowly and gently, the way you rebuild anything precious that has been broken and mended, understanding that the seams of such a repair, however carefully made, never fully disappear, but instead become part of the object's history, visible if you know where to look, but no less strong for being visible. We do not speak often of the 11 years apart, though sometimes, on quiet evenings, sitting on that same porch where fireflies still rise out of the grass each summer, just as they did in the earliest years of our marriage, she will tell me a small piece of that other life, the towns she lived in under names that were not her own. 3 different names across those 11 years, each one discarded when the marshal's office determined, for reasons they did not always fully explain to her, that a fresh start in a new location would be safer. The ordinary jobs she took in ordinary English towns, cleaning houses, working in a small bakery for a time, always watching over her shoulder, always keeping a small bag packed. A habit she confessed she has still not fully broken even now, always waiting for the day the marshal would call and tell her it was finally safe to come home. She tells me she thought of our farm every single day of those 11 years, that she kept, in whatever small rented room she occupied at any given time, a single pressed flower from our own garden, one she had managed to slip into her pocket on the very morning she left. A small violet that she pressed between the pages of whatever English paperback she happened to be reading at the time, carrying that single fragile bloom with her through 3 different names and 3 different towns, as her only physical connection to the life she had been forced to leave behind. She tells me she used to sit in unfamiliar kitchens in unfamiliar houses and hum the hymns we used to sing together, quietly, so no one else would hear, just to feel close to the life she had been forced to leave behind, and that more than once a stranger in a grocery store or a laundromat had caught the melody and asked her what she was singing, and she had always simply smiled and said it was an old song from her childhood, never able to explain the full truth of what that melody actually carried for her. Our children have slowly found their peace with all of it, each in their own time and their own way, the way a family always eventually finds its way back to steadiness after even the strangest and most painful disruption. My grandchildren, especially the one who found that seam in the Bible's cover, my bright granddaughter, now nearly grown herself, have grown up hearing this story not as a tale of abandonment, but as a tale of sacrifice, of a woman who loved her family enough to disappear so that harm would never find its way to our door. My granddaughter, in particular, has told me more than once that finding that seam changed something fundamental in how she sees the world, teaching her, she says, that the people we love most sometimes carry entire hidden oceans inside them. Oceans we may never fully see the bottom of, and that patience and gentle attention, the same patience her grandmother once showed a nervous young man's clumsy stitches at a long-ago quilting frolic, are sometimes the only tools we have for eventually glimpsing what those oceans hold. I think, in time, this whole strange, painful, and ultimately grace-filled story has taught all of us something about the many different shapes love is willing to take when it must. About how a mother's love can look, from the outside, indistinguishable from abandonment, and yet be, in its deepest truth, the single most protective and self-sacrificing act a person can offer the people she loves most. It has taught us about how patience, even patience stretched across 11 long and uncertain years, patience that at times felt less like faith and more like simple stubborn survival, can still be rewarded in ways we never dared to hope for, in ways that arrive not through some grand dramatic rescue, but through the quiet, ordinary miracle of a sharp-eyed 16-year-old girl noticing a slightly peeling corner of old end paper on an evening she had intended only to look for pressed flowers. I share this story with you today, on this channel, because I think there is something in it for anyone who has ever waited for an answer that seemed like it would never come. Anyone who has ever sat with a locked door in their own life, or in the life of someone they love, and wondered whether they would ever be given the key. I waited 11 years. I read her Bible almost every night of those 11 years, running my hands over that very cover, never once suspecting what it was quietly holding for me the entire time, sitting patient and silent through 11 autumns, 11 winters, 11 springs, 11 summers, through weddings and funerals and ordinary Tuesdays, waiting for someone finally curious enough and gentle enough to notice what the rest of us had overlooked for over a decade. Sometimes the truth is not hiding far away in some distant place, guarded by mystery and inaccessible to ordinary searching. Sometimes it is sitting on your own nightstand, waiting patiently, night after night, year after year, for the day you are finally ready to look closely enough to find it. If this story moved you even half as much as it still moves me every time I tell it, I would be so grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to this channel. And please tell me in the comments below where in the world you are watching this from tonight. I love reading through those comments and imagining all of you, in all your different corners of the world, sitting with me for a little while as I share these stories from my long life. There are more stories where this one came from, and I promise you, some of them are just as strange, just as painful, and just as full of grace as this one has been. I have lived a long life, longer than I ever expected when I was a young bride, sitting on a porch watching fireflies rise out of the grass. And I have come to believe that most of us are carrying at least one locked door somewhere inside us, one room we have not yet let anyone else see. I do not say that to frighten you, but to comfort you. Because if an old woman like Ruth can carry a hidden ocean for 26 years and still find her way home, and if an old man like me can wait 11 years and still find his answer, waiting patiently on his own nightstand, then perhaps whatever door you are standing in front of tonight is not as permanently closed as it feels. Thank you for staying with me through this one. Until next time, may you find every locked door in your own life opening exactly when it is meant to. And may whatever answer you are waiting for be closer than you think, perhaps even closer than the pages of a book, sitting quietly on your own nightstand tonight.